Welcome to SITS 101 with the Royal Manticore Navy.
Okay, good. Hello, I am Commander John Stout of the TRMN, and I'm also John Stout, the line coordinator for Honorverse products for Final Sword Productions, the producers of Saganami Island Tactical Simulator through their Ad Astra imprint at this time. The purpose of this is to show basic movement and how to fire and do damage in Saganami Island, or as we lovingly refer to it, those of us who play it, as SITS. Okay. We are going to be covering everything here so that you could take and follow along with this at your home. In order to show the idea and also to lay out what all the parts mean, because as you know, there's a lot of parts to this game. It is a three-dimensional space combat in David Weber's Honorverse that utilizes Newtonian and Einsteinian physics for movement. Now, for those of you who do not have a physics degree, this basically means if you are moving in a direction, you will keep moving in that direction until you do something to change it. Vectored movement. It also has 3 dimensions. So as we start on to laying out what you have, there is what's called a ship status display, which tells you the status of the ship you are utilizing. We will go into this a little bit more in detail. We have our wonderful box miniatures. As you can hear, there is a weight in there so that when you are putting them on the roll and pivot systems, that they will stay. That provided that, unlike what I just did, provided you get them on there properly. And as my wonderful assistant takes care of making a quick snapshot of it. Our purpose, we also have height indicators, which are plastic that show what your height is. A white one means that you are 1 level above or below the board. A light blue shows that you are 4 levels above or below. Dark blue shows that you are 8 levels above or below. And the black plastic piece shows that you are actually below the board. Okay. The way this has been set up is to teach this steppingly. While what we're doing here this afternoon is not exactly the same as would be done in an actual demo at a convention, we are still going to go through and show you how this works so that you can do it at yourself. The requirements do include that you have at least the base set for SITS 2.0. Certain of the ships I've got here that I'm going to explain are from the second ship book, which is the Silesian Confederacy. And there is a third ship book out which has big ships of the wall. More on that in another video. And while, if you just have the SITS 2.0 base set, you can pull any of these ships out of here to utilize. You do not necessarily have to pull just what exactly I have. You can do any 3 ships here so long as they are smaller than a heavy cruiser. Across the board, set up on that end, is a single Star Knight heavy cruiser. Over here comes 3 other ships that are fought. Now, these ships will not move. At any point of what you're doing on this, these ships don't move. Only that one moves. That is the one you're using to show. This is to show the movement easier than having things move against you. So the first thing is with the blue and white and black to show that it is 5 levels below, is a light cruiser of your choice, preferably People's Republic if you only have the base set. If you do have the second book, make it a Roclaw class CL, 5 levels below. Next, you take a frigate or a very small destroyer. Now, this guy is set with his bow pointing to the other ship. The smallest ship is going to sit on top of him, and he is going to be like this, which will show his wedge to his approaching enemy. The third one is a destroyer that you want to have his broadsides pointed to the Star Knight. Like I said, they don't move. They'll be fired at a certain point. For those who have not read David Weber's books, and I know a lot of people who are watching this have, but some may not have. So we're going to start the explanation from the very basics. In David Weber's physics, in the Honorverse, there are 2 pressed planes of gravity, angled, that will push the ship forward. And the ship is actually pulling them forward. And they are angled like this for the movement. Now, it's very hard for these 2 areas that are pressed planes of gravity, like I said, for anything to penetrate them. It won't penetrate them. So if they show the wedge to the enemy ship, it can't penetrate. The front and the back are completely open, which means there's no protection whatsoever except some armor. On the sides of these, here and here, as I'm showing with my pinky and thumb, there are what are known as sidewalls, which provide some form of shielding as missiles and all come in. Missiles in this game are not, oh hi, I'm firing a missile at you and it's going to impact you. The missiles in this game are bomb-pumped lasers. So you've got a big nuclear weapon in the warhead of the missile that when it gets to the appropriate point, it is going to blow apart. It's going to send these rods out that when the nuclear weapon goes off, the rods are going to concentrate the nuclear energy from the explosion that hits it before they are destroyed and turn them into an X-ray laser. We also have beam weapons. Beam weapons in this game, unfortunately, as you see, my map is 30 hexes across. Beam weapons in this game, must watch your things, will only extend to a maximum of that distance apart, which is about 4 hexes. Each hex is 0.8 of a light second, by the way. And that is for the largest weapons that are utilized by ships of the wall, equivalent of a ship of the line in a whitewater navy. Big ships. Most cruisers have their ranges to about here, to 3 hexes, and your destroyers usually have a range of no more than 2. And those beam weapons can only affect at that point. So most of the combat and most of the damage here is done by the missiles. So we will be centering quite a bit on missile combat. Beam weapons are another session. We are not dealing with beam weapons. So to go on to certain aspects of the game. First off, you have what is known as an AVID. The AVID is how we are going to produce orders for our ships and tell our ships what to do. If you notice, the map has a rosette running from A to F. This is the hex edges. In this game, hex corners do matter. If I am turning my ship and I am facing my ship in A, it is a turn to go to AB, to the hex corner between A and B. Then you can go to B, B, C, C, and so on. So you have 30-degree turning capability in this ship, as opposed to in some others where it's just simply the 60-degree hex side. Some other games. The Rosette and the Avid match each other. They never move. The Avid is designed to take a sphere and have your ship in the middle, and while your ship can do whatever it wants and turn and rotate and pivot and roll and everything, the Avids and the map are separate and are the same. Basically, the Avid is where I've taken the top half of this globe off and I'm looking down at it like this, and here's my ship. Okay. It can do whatever it wants. That's the first thing to realize. The Avid, again, the Avid and the Rosette do not move. They are equal and the same to themselves. Okay. Now, as you notice the Star Knight is pointing in A. So with the Avid, it is utilized for planning. It is also utilized to show your ship's arrangement. So if I have the ship pointing in A, I am going to take a triangle and show where my nose is. Well, from the bow, the direct opposite is the stern. That is your half circle. These two arrows show your port and starboard broadsides. A star will show the top of your ship, and it goes in the pink because it's 90 degrees apart. The anchor is put on the bottom, and it is circled. That shows the status of the Star Knight at this time. This part of the Avid is ship positioning and your vectors. If you will notice here, I have no numbers written on any of these symbols right here, because the ship is not moving, it is stationary. Down here is where we will plot the Avid. Is where we will do our plotting and write our orders, and we'll get to that in a second. The other aspect of this is in normal point, you would do all your plotting on the Avid like this hidden. When you are done plotting in a turn, you would flip your Avid face down to show your opponent, I'm done. And then both of you together will simultaneously flip the Avid over and let everybody have a look and go, oh my God, you mean you really doing that? What? How dare you put yourself in a position to shoot me up the kill? Up the stern. We'll sidetrack from the movement in the Avid and right here. This sheet is a data sheet. On one side you have an ECM and your active defense layers, and it also describes all the weapons. We will get more into this as we start talking about combat, and your salvo. On the back is some very interesting information. This talks about consolidating vectors so that I can turn around and only make sure that I'm going in two directions. Have two directions for a vector, an A and a B, or an A and an F. Over here is the turn sequence written down. This is a way to shoot bearings, some information on that. And this is your range angle lookup table. Because we are dealing with 3 dimensions, we need a method to handle the trigonometry. Now, everybody can do right triangle trig at the top of their head, as someone else over here happily waves at me that he can do right triangle trig from the top of his head. But for a lot of other people, they need a little help, and that's where this has done all that nasty math and hidden it behind a table so that you can look at it. So if you're looking to find the range of somebody who we'll say is 5 hexes away, 5 levels up, and 20 hexes away, and I am marking them on here right now, you just cross-index them until you reach them. So at 1 and 5, it says here that they are 20 hexes away. based on the right triangle trigonometry. You just go one and over like that. And now you have your right angle lookup. It also is color coded to show how far, what angle he is up. In the AVID you have 4 colors. The first color of yellow gives a 30-degree point 15 degrees above your horizontal plane and 15 degrees below it. That is even. You go up another 30 degrees to 15 to 45 degrees, and that is your blue. Because then that's showing that you are not here, but here. And he's somewhere up that way as opposed to being straight off on you. Your 45 to 75 is your green. And that is, he's up here. On your 75 to your other 75, covering 90 degrees, that shows he's straight up above you. In this game, you can fire into the yellow and to the blue based on how your ship is oriented. If it's in green or pink, you can't fire there. That's firing through the wedge. Remember, the wedge is impenetrable. Quick explanation there on the colors. They come in handy later on. While we're not getting intricately into three-dimensional movement here, we will be touching three-dimensional movement. Another set here is, as we'll go back to the SSD, the SSD has many areas. Some of them we are not going to deal with in this. You have this wonderful officer and crew level that does not affect here for us. Remember, I said we were doing basic movement and firing. We're not going to get into any of the intricate points because I don't want to confuse people. You have a number of these internals that have effects in the game. They are not being used because we're keeping it simple. As you notice, you have 4 what are called firing arcs. The forward and aft hammerhead, which is your chase armament, your port and starboard broadside, which is the stuff that does the heavy stuff. Now, like I said, we're doing vectored movement here, just to give you an idea. Your port and starboard broadside is a 90-degree chunk on the port and starboard of your ship. I like to think of it personally as a missile, as a bucket. And if I have 2 ships coming like this, they're going to get a quick shot as they go past. And they got to go all the way out there, turn around, and then come back to try it again. Very, very difficult. Takes a long time to kill somebody. What you want to do is to merge your vectors so that you keep the enemy in that nice, wonderful broadside bucket, and you throw missiles in it till your problem goes away. Just as a point there, and that is the best way to look at it. The broadsides have more weapons, and they have better defenses. And just to show, if you notice on each of these, they have a symbol that is to show where their firing arc is. As you notice, they match the symbols you're using on the AVID for forward, stern, port, and starboard. As you can tell here on the forward hammerhead, it is anything that's white is where you can fire. Anything that's black, those weapons can't fire there. So your port weapons can fire, your forward weapons, pardon me, can start with your arrowhead and can go 1 window around the arrowhead, above and below the plane. So this would be your forward firing arc. Notice the green and the pink cannot be fired in. Again, that's the wedge. You can't penetrate it. Your aft, your starboard and your port broadsides have the same sized firing arc. So they can go to the blue and the yellow around that symbol. That's an open firing area. Because of the shape of the wedge, remember it's bigger at front than it is at the back, they can only fire to the two areas beside in the yellow for the aft. So this is how your firing arcs are. Anything in these blue, these blue and these yellow windows is generally able to be fired on, except of course you can't fire the blue in the aft, on the aft. But that is how the firing arc looks. Note and recommendation on a side note. Do not, it is probably not the best thing to utilize wet erase markers in this game. Wet erase markers can get messy. Dry erase is your friend. A third part here is, if you will notice, these are all laminated. It's worth the money to buy a laminator and laminate your SSDs. Trust me from personal experience. If you don't want to have to keep paying for them, paying to make copies of them. You are authorized to make copies of SSDs for your personal use. That is part of the license that the game conveys. So, for any of the SSDs, feel free to copy them. They are yours to copy. You can't really copy the rules, you can't copy the other stuff, but the SSDs you are open to copy for, and make as many copies as you would like. Yes, I had a paper towel here. Paper towels are my friend. Okay, back to the SSD and what we've got here. Now that I've gotten my two side notes, because I'd like to help people save money. This, like I said, is your opening, is how you can fire. Starting at the top, you have this thing marked fire control. You don't want hits there. They make it harder to hit the other guy. You will see a set of dots over here to the side. Those are the magazine. Magazine is your missile magazine. Each dot is a salvo. It's not an individual missile. If you have 3 missile tubes facing on a side, then each salvo is 3 missiles. If you have 20, each salvo is 20 missiles. The top row on all 4 arcs is your missile arc, is your missiles. Those are the number of missile tubes to your side. Below that will be beam weapons. Now, one of the things about beam weapons, you will notice that there are multiple numbers. Just to keep it up here, a Star Knight on its forward arc has, for example, 1175. The largest number is in your hex and one hex away. The next number would be for 2 hexes. The third number would be for 3 hexes. And if there was another number, that would be 4 hexes away. So, okay. Below that is a CM row, a row predecessed with CM, which is your counter missiles. They are long-range defenses to try to take down missiles. Your last one is point defense, which is your in-close defenses to shoot missiles as a last resort. In your port and starboard broadsides, you have what are called decoys. We're not dealing with them in this one, which is why, as you look at the thing, you'll know I put an X on it. We're not dealing with them. They are an advanced combat that will be done in another sitting. The way to tell what type of weapon you're looking at, if the first number is always the damage, any numbers are always the damage on your offensive weapons. If there's an M after the number, that's a missile. If there's an L, it's a laser. If there's a G, it's a gamma ray laser, or grazer as they're referred to in David Weber's books. The following, you will have some that have an ET on them, or energy torpedo. Usually the ones that have energy torpedo also have up here in the broadsides one marked Grav Lance. Special weapon in combat. If you really want to know about it, read the first book on Basilisk Station. They have a really good show of why the Grav Lance is not wonderful on smaller ships. On ships of the wall, entirely different. Moving down the page from below the 4 firing arcs, you have the hit location table. On that hit location table, there is a grid, and we will cover this later on as to how we do the procedure for damage, but that will show how your damage works. There is a gray area that is your core damage. That's where all the really important things are, and usually a lot of your structural integrity is in the core of your ship. At the top, underneath the hit location table, you will see a marked scale, which is basically how big and how tough your ship is. Right next to it is core armor. The rating for the core armor is how many points of damage it soaks to cross from the white to the colored area. So if I'm doing 5 points deep on one of these into the fat part of the ship, I'm not going to penetrate into the core of the armor. 6 will, but the 5th is soaked up by that core armor. You have your sidewalls listed here and here, and you'll notice here and here it's always a +1 because it's only armor protecting the front and the back. Moving over to the right, you will see an area marked range bands. The range bands, this area here is to tell how many salvos you have. It's only done one time during each missile phase. Here at the bottom is how well the missile will perform based on the range that's in the center, and we will go, again, we'll go into that when we start doing combat. Down here below that is internals. That's your bridge, your flag bridge, your life support, your communications, your electronic countermeasures, very important, your roll and pivot, your forward and aft impellers, and your current thrust. You also have your hyper generators, which don't really have anything right here unless you're trying to get away. You have your hull, which is how much of the other space there is. Storage, quarters, all the stuff for people to live in. But that does have a hull value. And followed after that is your structural integrity. On the structural integrity chart, you will see blank squares, which are basically free hits. You will see squares that have a C on them. That means a critical hit. We will get into those later. And then you have a set of octagons with numbers. In the Star Knight's case, that number starts with 4. That is the number on a 10-sided dice you need to be equal to or greater than to keep your ship in the game. If you strike the 4 and you roll a 3 or less, your ship's done. It's blown up. If you roll above the 4 or above, your ship is still in play and you can keep going until the next critical hit, in which you'll have to roll higher than a higher number. They go up by 1 after that initial start. Enough on the SSD. So, we have got our ship's design. As you can tell, these ships are far enough away. This ship does not have the range to fire at them where he is currently. In order to do anything, he needs to thrust at his opponent. That means that he has got to start moving towards them. So, what's going to happen is we now have to take that ship and have it thrust. It's currently facing in area toward the A on the rosette. So this AVID structure will work. As you can tell, some of us who are old hands here will erase them with just our thumb. We won't necessarily utilize this. So we have him drawn out, and what we are then going to do is show how thrust works. In thrust, you have, on horizontal thrust, where you're not going up or down, you have two areas. One says edge, the other says corner. If my ship is facing to the edge and I'm thrusting, I am going to use the edge to tell how far it goes. If my ship is facing this way to a corner, I'm going to use the corner, because I have got to split as evenly as possible on my thrust through those two hexes, through the B and the C directions. One thing you will find is a small tent that is the end of turn marker. That is where your ship will end up. Remember, we're doing vectored movement here, so we have to have a way to show people the vector and what my current vector is. And that is how the end of turn is. It will show where you end up. This will show where the small squares, red and yellow, will show where the midpoint is. The reason for this is we have 3 missile firing phases: early, middle, and late. Early happens before movement, middle happens after half of the movement's done, late happens after all the movement's done. Again, early, middle, and late. Okay. Now, we have removed the ships that are going to stay on the top here in this part by here, because that way those ships can, in all honesty, not clutter things up. I have turned this ship to be the light cruiser so that it will be able to be used when we get to that point. These I will set over there. Okay, so how do we start? How do we tell somebody that, remember, in most normal points, you're going to be like this, marking on your AVID to show when and how, and do this secretly. We're going to do this openly right now so that the camera can get a picture of the AVID as we do it. So you're doing an edge. We're going on edge A. You mark the edge. And because we want to start moving, we are going to have the thrust set to 2. If you look on your SSD at this point, this is how much your maximum thrust can be. In this case, it's 3 for the Star Knight. But I don't want to go 3. I am going to go 2. Because there is the physical concept of the mass to weight ratio, and that the more you thrust and the more fuel you use, the further you go, and that you have to accelerate, and that by doing the acceleration, it's going to start slow and compound. Remember, we're in space. There's no friction here. There's nothing stopping us. So the faster we go, we're just going to keep compounding on that vector. So we're starting slow and getting faster. Well, because we're starting from rest, or we're starting from a set point, if we already had a vector, it takes time to build the change. But this is reflected in SITS by the term displacement. When you lay thrust on something, like we've done here at 2, you are able to displace your end of turn marker to half of that thrust to show that you're starting to build up speed. So what's going to happen is, on the Star Knight's counter, we're going to put the end of turn marker 1 hex toward the enemy ships. And so if you will look at the picture that will be shown up here, so that we can get a picture, you'll see the Star Knight has his end of turn marker placed because of this. what the next step that happens is, after we reveal, we then get to do missile cards, missiles. This is a salvo card. As you can tell, on this side you have early, middle, late salvos. Underneath them are the directions on them. This is the number. This is the range, the impact window, where the other guy's going to see the missile coming from, basically, and the base MQL of the missile, how good the missile's going to work. The backside has the missile's damage, the target scale, the sidewall, and the depth modifier. These three are dealt with by the person you hand it off to. You only fill the ones that are trimmed in blue. That's your filling. But the first thing one has to do is we have got to count from our end of turn marker to the other ship's end of turn. Remember how I was mentioning up here that this will determine how many salvos? Well, in order to do that, we have to know what our range is. And the range here is 29, I believe, is 29. Eighteen, 19, 20. It's 29. That means I have a range of 29. I'm going to check on the Star Knight. I am going to look at 29. You'll notice it's at the very, very end of the range. So this is going to be a really long shot for the Star Knight. Because the Star Knight, so when you compare over here, you will notice it's a late salvo. That means that's the only salvo. Now that we've done that, we don't care what this top part means for the rest of the turn until we come around to determine our ranges again. At this point, he's going to be at range 30. Because if you notice this, it says midpoint to late. So he's going to be at range 30. Technically, that's a little bit out of range, and you couldn't fire it. So we know that while he has a late salvo, he really doesn't have a firing solution yet. So what's going to happen is that ship will move forward 1 to the end of turn, marker, and then we will start the next turn. But after the movement is done, because he has thrust 2 here, you put a 2 here in A to show that is your new vector. And the white is used for changes, the gray is used for permanent. So this is the permanent, this is the changed. We don't have to change the AVID because he hasn't done any turns or anything yet. We're getting into turns here shortly. So we'll put out the 2 to show if this enemy were maneuvering against you, this enemy would be the one who, in all honesty, would be wanting to know where you're going. Well, right now we can see where he's going. You notice he has an end of turn marker placed out here. He has a midpoint to show where the middle is. And then there's his ship. We're now ready for the next turn and for doing plotting on the next turn. And because we're going to be sneaky and dirty, we're now going to have you turn. We're now going to have him turn. The thing is, we're going to have him pivot, do 2 things. First off, he can reduce the thrust at the beginning of the turn however he wants. So he's not going to go 2 anymore, he's going to go 1. He's also going to pivot, make a pivot. Now, in an airplane, this is his pitch, this is yaw, and this is roll. And in an airplane, in an atmosphere, they have specific things and how they handle the characteristics of flight based on drag and lift and how I'm turning and where the air is going and everything like that. A whole lot of things that were just too much to go into right now. In space, we don't have atmospheric drag and everything. So for the purposes of our game, what would have been a pitch and a yaw, we call a pivot. Doesn't matter if you're going this way, this way, this way. That's a pivot. If you're moving the nose from going straight in any direction, that's a pivot. Either here or here. Pivots drag the nose. Roll, you're going to move one of your sides on the AVID to show that. So for example, we want him to pivot to direction B. And in this, we're going to take his nose and pull his nose to the B. We mark 2 slashes here to show that that's where we're ending. The maximum number of windows you can pivot or roll are on these factors right here. And on the Star Knight, he is currently at 5. So he's a rather agile little bugger. Well, not so little. But at the also point, at the middle of that pivot, you make a single mark to show where you're going to end up at the midpoint. Now, on the AVID, we have it marked for the midpoint. In all reality, on playing the game, this is another little blurb off to the side here. In our point in playing the game, if nothing's happening in the middle segment and the early segment for missiles, for example, or nobody's doing anything that requires anything funky in the middle of the movement, a lot of times, skip them, go to the end, do the late salvo, and continue on. It will make your games a lot shorter. So, we've got his fire, we've got what he's doing. Now, again, we start, we count, and at which point we are going to be at 27 end of turn to end of turn. If you will notice, and you will notice that the target ship does not have an end of turn marker on it because he's not moving. He's not doing any vector. He is standing perfectly still. He is awaiting to get everything that the Manties have to give him because they're Manties scum. From the Silesian perspective, of course. All right, as we continue on. So we're 27 away. At being 27 away, we compare for him, and you will notice he is still late salvo. At the cruiser, he cannot fire at 27 hexes. He can't fire until he's at 26. While I realize it's a little hard to see this, he can't fire till 26. So he's got to sit and take whatever the Star Knight's going to give him. The first thing you do before you fill out your missile salvo card is you put a dot at the to show that you fired a salvo. Remember, each circle in the magazine is a salvo, not a single missile. Then what we are going to do is, as you notice, the number of missiles has been put first, which is 3. The range is 28, which, as per the card, is from his midpoint to my end of turn, because he sees this target in A. The target's going to see it the exact opposite, or in D. He's going to think the missiles come from D. And down here at the bottom is what is known as the missile quality level. So he is going to go to here, look at his range of 28, and go down here and take this number for the missile quality. There we go. Okay. His missile quality is 10. Now, that is how, and then of course on the back side, he has written the damage, which is 7. So now we have a missile quality, and then he has happily handed it over to the Silesian, so the Silesian can now deal with what he's given him. Ain't it great? Unfortunately, there's no regifting of missiles. But the first thing we're going to do is utilize the ECM, is utilize the defense track. Up here at the top, you have a number of places to write things down. Going from left to right, you have your base MQL, which is the MQL of the missile salvo coming in. You have your ECM, because everybody needs good electronic countermeasures. The wedged is not dealt with unless somebody has turned their wedge toward you. After that is a 2 die 10, is what is noted as 2 die 10 minus. And then you have the decoy. Decoy we are not dealing with here. That is, again, an advanced combat like I mentioned earlier. Now you have your ECM quality and your number of missiles. If you will note, the missiles run from 1 to 10. Then they go in increments of 10, from 10 to 100. This way, if I'm going to take a salvo of 146 missiles, I will be going, whatever my ECM quality is, I will be adding up the lines of 100 plus the line for 40 plus the line for 6 to get how many missiles have decided to go off into La La Land. They're not going to hit the ship now. So in this case, from the card, his base MQL is 10. My ECM, which is here, is 1, because it's Silesian and they're not very good. I don't worry about a wedge because we're not wedged. And then I'm going to take 2 10-sided dice. I will roll them, and then I will take the largest number, which is 8, and subtract the smallest number from it, which is 3. 8 minus 3 equals 5, which I put right here. I then add these numbers together. Whatever numbers I've got in here, I add them together. In this case, it will be 16. I have 3 missiles coming in. So I take the 3 row, and I take it across to 16, which gives me 2. Down here at the bottom is your impacting. I will put my salvo here, and my 2 ECM kills here. I've already dealt with 2 out of 3 missiles. That's a chase salvo. We understand how they work. The next step is that the counter missiles would fire off. For that, I take the same base MQL. I roll another 2 die 10 minus roll, which in this point brings it to a 1. I believe it is time to shoot my ATO for that one. I total them up. Now, on this table down here, for both the counter missiles and point defense, it says probable kills. Probable kills means the probability that all of their counter missiles are going to make a certain number of kills. You find this right here on your point defense and counter missiles. That is what this number means. This is your probable kills. The poor Silesian, nasty that he may be, has the unfortunate problem of having a 2/3 probable kill. It's got a 2/3 chance to kill a single, to kill a missile. So I don't care the number of missiles. Missiles do not count. All I care about is that 2/3 probable kill. I have an 11. I'm going to cross them. The number is 1. I've stopped the entire salvo. Hint, missiles get better the closer you get up to a certain point. Then, for example, most Manticorans have their best shots at the joy of being range 2 to 4. So if this is where my ship is, and the firing ship is here, he's at his best range. Here to here is the best range for the Manticorans. Horns. You don't want them to get in that range. They really want to hover there, because they will do so much fun for you. You are in their bucket, and they really want to show you how much they appreciate it by gifting you lots of missiles, especially if it's the broadside. But we've dealt with our missile salvo. So the ship moves to its end of turn marker. We only thrust 1. So now when we set up our end of turn vector, 1 plus 2 is 3. We're actually going to be turned into the B direction. 1 plus 2 is 3, and we're going to go 3 forward in A. Be it 3A. I will take this, put the 3 here, and now we have the other part here, which is where we take and redo our AVID to show the new arrangement of the ship, which is the nose in B, the stern here, right. Now, a little bit of relationships here. I know none of us like commitment. In this case, this is relationships that help you draw out your AVID. You have your nose. Either of your broadsides are 3 windows at the or 3 windows away. Notice 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Same goes for the stern. The stern is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The top and bottom are 1, 2, 3 away from the nose and stern, but they're going up, so they're facing 90 degrees apart. This way you keep the relationships together. Certain funky movements, the relationships get lost. In this way you keep them together. This turn we're going to do something different. Now, just to let you all get the understanding here. If you look at his ship, you'll notice he's facing in B. Technically, because the broadside is at the FA corner, he could supposedly have him in a broadside sight. The problem with this is that we're pivoting again, because we want to pivot from B all the way over to F. That means at the halfway point, he is going to be in D, facing the opponent. So while it looks at the start of the turn like he may get a broadside shot, in all reality, he's not. Because by the time he's able to fire the late salvo at the midpoint of the movement, his nose will have moved from here to here on the way to going to here. So at that point, oh well, it's another forward salvo. So of course he marks here, fills out his missile card, and also before the turn lays out his vector of 3A. One thing to note, if placing the midpoint marker would place it on a hex border, the person controlling the ship gets to decide which of the two adjacent hexes he's in. Now, at this point, we are going to be at 24 hexes, which will still only give us a late salvo. It will not give us an early yet. But he is pivoting like I showed all the way over here. Notice at half is 1 and at the end is 2. He is not doing anything otherwise. One thing we're going to do for you though is show you that a pivot can be in any direction, any number of hexes. They can go up or down as you would like. In this instance, he could have gone and decided to pivot 1, 2, 3, 4. He could do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So he could have done any of these pivots, but we want him to pivot down the road so he will still fire. Again, they haven't moved yet, but at 24 hexes, they get a shot. And his end of turn is 24 hexes away. So we will, of course, fire there with our wonderful 3 missiles at a 24 range, impact window A, and our base MQL is 13. And of course we put our wimpy 4 damage on the other side. Not that we think we're going to hit, and then I hand him, and he hands me. Now we're still firing the same number of missiles. So we can now move ourselves to the end of turn marker, how we were going to be put, yes. And we mark, of course, 1 and B here. One rule about pivots. If I pivot my ship, I cannot displace it. Displacement has to be continually on straight movement. So, we're going to do the same thing over again. And like I said, my wonderful assistant over here is taking care and doing his impacting, which I believe, which is his impacts to see if I manage to hit him, which I personally think, no, that's not going to happen. And as you can see, I'm doing exactly the same thing I did last time. This, my ECM, 2 die 10 minus roll of 2, makes that 13 to the 3, and it's only going to be 1 missile here. You come down here with 10, we do our 2 die 10 minus roll. Now, 0 when doing this is 10. So what is 10 minus 10? I rolled 2 10s. 10 minus 10 is 0, which means I got nothing on my die 10 roll. We've just gotten information that these silly missiles did not strike the Grand Manticoran ship. And as you can see, here's how he has done this for his. But 10 and my probable kill of 2/3 gives me 1. And then on the second one, 10 plus 1 is 11, which at 2/3 only gives me 1. Again, none have passed through. The first 3 turns here, you will be doing this quite a bit. Again, we take We erase everything. We show our new vector in our F direction. We have 1 in B. We have 3 in A. And we are going to continue our single thrust. One thrust, only this time it's going to be an F. So at the end of the turn, we will have 1 in F. And we'll have 1 in B and 2 in A. No, 3 in A, I'm sorry. 3 in A, pardon me. So now we go on again and we do our wonderful salvoing. He lays out his vector. He's the only one that's moving, has a vector. And we get to go get to check how much range we have. So our range is determined to be 20. For us, that's a late salvo. For him, it's a late as well. He has not yet gotten quite close enough. Like I said, our thrust is going to change to F. And now we're going to pivot to BC plus. What that means is, while pointing to the BC hex side like this means you are BC. You go up to the blue, you're BC plus. You go to the green, you're BC plus plus. And when you go to here, you are 90 degrees up. You're not having any movement at that, any additional movement or anything here. So we had determined that we are 20 away. We still haven't had a missile land yet. 22. Oh, I know. I'm going to the 20 because I'm going into, yes. And of course, impact window A, and our basic MQL. Because we are Silesian trash, and I do mean trash, means that we are at an MQL of 12. And our wonderful damage. Yes, the Manticorans, at the range of 22 they're firing at, their MQL is 9. Bully for them. And again, as you can tell, we're doing the same thing. Now, we haven't had any hits yet. Okay, this is okay, sort of. And 3 will be 1. But we're trying to make sure the closer you get, the higher the probability of missiles that will get through. Two-thirds makes 1. And then the final one of 9, 4, 13, and 2/3 is 1. So we keep shooting down this chase armament. We can deal with this. And of course, our wonderful Manticoran over there has actually managed to kill more missiles than were fired at him. Mainly because the counter missiles all went, oh, 1 missile left, yeah! Gotta love technology. Now, this next turn, what is going to happen is, he is going to pivot to BC plus. Remember, I said the blue is plus, the green is plus plus, and then you don't worry about when they're standing up and down. This is a shorthand to tell you where you're going to end up. In this case, you would want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ending up here with this as your midpoint. So he is actually and it's BC plus, John, he is actually able to get this pivot in, and it's basically he is turning himself to where his broadside is going to be completely around, but he's still thrusting in F. And of course he's going to lay out his end of turn. But, oh, wait a minute, we've got 3 vectors here. We have to consolidate them. If you flip over this card, you will notice that there's a consolidation cheat sheet. These guys are 120 degrees apart. So we're going to use the 120 degree consolidation. The first thing you do is take from the smallest of the 2 outer ones, in this case the B and the F. They're even, so we're going to subtract 1 from each, making them 0. We're going to add that 1 into the A. And this is because 1, 2, 3, 4 A, and then 1B, 1, 2, 3 A, 1 B, and 1 F is, in all honesty, the same as 4A. Do it on the hex map a couple of times, and you'll see where we're coming from. So you're just consolidating them back in. You should have no more at the end of the consolidation than 1 up-down vector and 2 vectors on the horizontal. If you got any more, you haven't consolidated correctly. Yes, isn't it nice? Okay, and now we're going to do our missile cards again. Because I believe, well, and the range was? Range was 16. At 16, both of us will be, as you see, here's the 16. We're going to be in the middle late. We're going to get 2 salvos. Yay for us. Of course, it's going to be a middle and a late. So one of them is going to be shipped to midpoint. The other one's going to be the midpoint to the end of turn. But we're pivoting, so while we're pivoting, we will still only be able to fire at the midpoint to chase armament. But because the middle fires from the ship itself, he gets to fire a broadside. I only get to fire core armor. And we hand them over. The Manties again have done it again. They have gotten closer. They now have an 8 MQL. The closer they get, the more we begin to dislike them. Bad Manties. Bad. Or at least let us forgive them. And as you notice, I'm marking this down. Now, at certain points here, we're just not going to explain to you about the missile stuff until we have something new to explain. The reason we're going to do this is because we do not want to keep you here seeing the same things in the video all the time. We all have things we want to and have to do. And of course, the Manties did it again and stopped the Silesian missiles cold. Okay, all right. Oh, what do you know? If you will note here, we had no PD kills. And again, follow along with these on your copies. They got one missile through. In the middle salvo. So they got one through on me. I'll be lucky and holding my breath if they got two, if they take any damage. Okay. Well, there's the late salvo. Let me guess, nothing on the middle. Yes, we already showed the middle. Nothing on the middle, and this is the late, and again, nothing. Well, he got on the middle salvo, one missile in on me. So the question now is, what do we do? Well, the first thing I have to do is turn my card over and start figuring out what I'm going to tell him as a depth modifier. So I take my scale of 4. Remember, I'm only Silesian trash. And put here. I then will take my sidewall. Oh, I have none because I'm up here at the forward. So I'm going to take this figure of +1 and add here. The formula is the missile damage minus the scale plus the sidewall will give me my depth modifier. In this case, 7 minus 4 leaves me 3 plus a -4. And anytime you add a negative number to a positive, you treat it as subtraction. So that will make it a -1. No, that'd make it a 1. So I'm going to put a 1 right here. Actually, no, it will make it a 4. So that's a 4. Sometimes even my math fails. So he's going to take a dice, and he is going to roll a 10-sided dice, and he's going to add 4 to it. 9 plus 4 is 13. Now that means this missile is going to go 13 deep somewhere. Now we roll 2 10-sided dice, of which he is rolling, and it's at number 3. And at this point, this is not going to be very pleasant, but it's not going to be as bad as we would have thought about it. So starting from here, on this row 2, 3, which shows where his damage is, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Basically everything from here to here, I take damage in that one straight line because we are a laser head. So I lose a fire control on my forward hammerhead. What this means is there is a +1 in the next box. I now have to add to every missile he fires, this ship fires, 1 to the MQL of every missile fired. I have to use a column shift number, this right here, and we'll shift back. Here, 8 and 5 is 13. I'd actually read off the 12 table because I have a fire control issue now. This is bad. Understand something. any damage suffered in the same phase. So we're both firing missiles at doing the missile damage. Any damage there is simultaneous. Once we go to the next weapon system, then that damage is simultaneous and doesn't affect us. We go to the next weapon system while we're still going to use for our turn, next missile salvo, next missile impact, we will have to take into account the damage. But continuing on, I get to number 8, and that's a missile. It's on my starboard broadside. I have a second missile at number 9. At number 10 is a third missile. Number 11 is a fourth missile. Number 12 is a fifth missile. 13 and 14 are also missiles. 1, 2. So now, as you notice, and I'm marking these through here, as you notice, my starboard broadside has nowhere near the missiles it had. This is going to hurt. That was one hitting. So now we go on and we do the next salvo. Now I've already shown you his late salvo. I have to do this now with my salvo. Of course, he's Manticoran. He has an 8. I still only have 1 ECM. And I'm just going to go ahead and go through this and tell you and show you the results afterwards. 10 minus 2 is 8. Makes 17 against 3 more missiles. That's 2 of them down. 8 plus my 2 die 10 of 8 minus 5 is 3. That's 11. But I read off the 10 column because I have a fire control issue. Down to the 2/3, I will kill 1. So this late salvo, nobody's landing anything. And we're going to clean up everything and lay out our new vectors. If you will notice, because the nose moved, the top and the bottom move as well because of that pivot, and that is why I've done this here and why they are no longer pointing into the pink, which is straight up and down, because the ship is tilted. But if I'm going to set thrust again, in this case, we're going to set the thrust to 1, and we are going to, right. Now, we're setting thrust to 1, but we're pointing up. Here's where we start getting into the 3-dimensional movement. Because we're pointing up, I now have to take into account the ability and the fact that he's facing upward. So, he's facing upward at a 1. I can take from this arrow to anywhere that there is a blue 1, which the only one is right here. On this vertical plotting grid, because we're going to start going vertical, you have up here is the horizontal movement. This is vertical. In his case, I have pointed to this 1. I go over here to find out I'm going to go up 1, and I go here to find out I am going to go 1 on, would you accelerate 1 on this direction. Because on the now I take what I found here over to the vertical, I'm facing in BC. And I get to determine, do I want to sidle more to the B or more to the C? We will go to the B, which means we will displace, we will store our displacement. Half of 1 is 1/2. Well, we have no way to mark 1/2 on the AVID. So we're going to go in there and put in and save the displacement here so that he can use it next time. That is what we want to do. If you have any questions on the vertical plotting, give me a call. Or send me an email. On my point, there will be a show of our cards so that you can look at so that you can make sure you guys can find and be able to email me. So we're going to go back around again. I believe our range is 11. So range 11, I'm still a middle and a late. Knowing him, he will probably also be a middle and a late. Yeah, okay, so he's a middle and late as well. I still only get 3. AA and base MQL, because I am at range 14 exactly, my MQL is 10, and because I am at range 12, my is 10. So both of these have an MQL of 10. And the Manticorians have gone down to a 7 again in the MQL. They like doing this. I don't know why, but they seem to think that it's kind of fun. Yep. And your incoming missiles are 12. By the way, if you notice, the Manticorians are now firing broadsides. It is entirely different here. This is the 13, 1, 2, and then down here to 10, and I add them together. The 4 plus the 1 means I will have shot 5 missiles, have told 5 missiles to go somewhere else. Oh, wow. His middle shows that while we are getting closer to sinking somebody, actually, it's not really happening yet. And at this point, my wonderful and glorious things are not going quite as well as they should. And my opponent got 6 in on me. Ouch. And of course, the Manticorans have defended themselves against the Silesians yet again. Okay, 6 of them in. Yay. Down the throat. +4, sir. Yeah. And he's rolling 4 dice. He's rolling 4 dice and he's adding 1 to each of them. In these instances, 9 is counted as a 0. Go ahead. All right. Ouch. I have a 14, a 14, a 5, a 5, an 8, and a 13. And those are my depths because he is actually hammering me. All right. The next one will be 16 on this one, which is point defense, counter missile, 2 forward impeller hits, which whenever you take a forward impeller hit, always remember to mark it off on the proper speed for the thrust. 2 hull, 13. Ooh. Every time you take a hull hit, you roll 2 10-sided dice and you subtract the lowest from the highest. In this case, that's 8 for the first one. The second one is 4. And we no longer have a hull. So because of that, the remaining 1, 2 hull hits are now what are considered structural integrity hits. Now you notice I've marked these 2. There is a 6 to start with. I need a 6 or higher for the for this one to stay in the game. And no, we did not make it, and he goes bye-bye. And that is basically combat. Now there are a couple of other aspects here of the combat that we needed to stress on you on this point. If, for example, someone has wedged you, and we're taking a salvo of 12 missiles to the wedge, which means that as a wedged ship, he would look like this on the board. Everything else is still exactly the same. You're going to take the MQL, you're going to handle the EW, take the MQL, handle the EW, you're going to handle the counter missiles and the point defense. Well, first off, we're going to do your EW. So we'll take that same salvo he fired at us, where he had fired 12 missiles at us. So I'm going to take my EW, his MQL was 7, my ECM was 1, I'm going to wedge 12, that will add 12 to my target number. I'm going to roll my 2 die 10 minus, making it a 5. So that's going to give me 17, 24, 25 total. If you're over 25 in your MQL, in your EW quality, just use the 25 range. You use the 25 and then you can take the extra by coming back up the other way as well. But take the 25, be done with it, and go and get the other one, because you're going to have a bad, nasty storm. So, 25, I've got 12 coming in, 2 and 10. So I'm going to add 9 and 2 and make 11 missiles. Now, we've got 1 missile remaining. If the wedge is up, you cannot use countermeasures. These go away. If the wedge is down, or if the wedge is, if he is not wedged, you don't use the 12. Okay, but if he's wedged, you get no counter missile fire. Remember that. Point defense fire. To kill, half of the kills are round down on point defense. And the reason because of this is here's how the sidewall. Here's your sidewall. If the missile comes here to the wedge, runs the wedge, and comes over, you have a small amount of time to engage it, which is why it's half the point defense kills. And this would be 7 and 4 is 11. Of course, I have a column shift on him. You know, I have a column shift on him from the last, you know, from the fire control hit. So that would be 11 over to 10. My, you know, 2/3 for my shot for my ability. That's 1 because of, you know, who I knew and how I got to it. And then I roll here and do 7 and 3 is 10. Slide over, and I am going to get 1. And that 1 is going to be halved, so I'm not going to get any. Which means he gets 1, but 1 got past my wedge. What it did past my wedge, what it actually did is came, saw the wedge, ran the wedge to get around. So what's going to happen is we're going to roll odd even, play odd even. I usually say odd is this way, fore and aft, even is this way, just to find out where the missile's going to end up in a rough guesstimate. He rolled odd, so it's going to come either fore or aft. Odd is forward, aft makes, you know, aft is even. He rolled a 5, that makes it odd. Guess what comes down my throat? We would now calculate our depth modifier accordingly, which in this case would have made it a +5. 5 plus 5 is 10. Now he'll roll his location normally. And 7 plus 1 is 8. Which means we would take 8 deep, pardon me, 10 deep on the 8 row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10. Damage is done just the same way. Now, as a difference, when you have sidewalls, you will take always the highest negative. So a sidewall here for the cruiser would have been a -3. So if I have this as 7, my scale is 4, my base MQL, of course his, is 7, and the sidewall is a -3. 7 plus 4 is 3, plus a -3 is 0. That's how the depth modifier is going to work. That's what the sidewall does. Remember, in math, when you take a positive and add a negative to it, you treat it as though you were just subtracting from the number again. So that's 0. And he gets to roll a 10-sided dice to find out where it impacts. I will do this for him right now because he is over taking care of something else. That's a 3. 3 plus 0 is 3. I'm still going to take 3 damage wherever it may end up. But because I'm firing to the sidewall, I have something with additional protection. If, after you have done your depth modifier plus the die roll, and that result is exactly 0, you do damage to all your damage goes and applies to as normal. It's just the sidewall impedes the damage. Well, that is everything on how the combat works. Rather than have you watch a consistent running, we have covered the combat. My first suggestion to everyone on this is after seeing any of these, is that you go out and you start playing. You take and you maneuver against the 3 ships on your own. Start up, maneuver, follow what I've said on the early maneuvering. Shoot the ships when you have a chance. Get yourself practice. Also, if you have questions, you can email me at my address at Final Sword Productions. Or look for me at a con I go to, because I are usually announced. I'll go to a number of TRMN events, and I try to make sure they are always posted at least a month in advance. The biggest thing about it is you could come see me demo this. This is everything taught at the point here. I'm not going to inflict a 4-hour recorded video to you, because we all have things that we would prefer to be doing in that 4 hours. But I am going to give you the basic information. Like I said, the other thing is realize that a number of TRMN cons, and they are growing daily and monthly as more TRMN people are able to do these adventures at conventions, to do these classes at conventions. Feel free to always come in and take one or more of the classes. The TRMN won't bite you. They're good people, and odds are you'll meet me there. Other than that, happy gaming. I would take the time to thank the TRMN for everything that they've been doing to help with this, and the fact that the TRMN are the ones who've actually taken the recording of the video. Like I said earlier, good night and good game.
You have been watching the first of many videos from the Royal Manticore Navy detailing how the Saganami Island Tactical Simulator, produced by Final Sword and the Ad Astra imprint, are to be played. Please feel free to seek out any TRMN member at a convention, and if they are not qualified to teach you SITS 101, they will put you in touch with John or someone else through the organization who is. Until then, let's be about it and do it with honor.